Hello everyone, my name's Addison and I'm the host of Defining Resilience, PCSB Edition, a series where I talk to faculty, students, and alumni from Providence College about what it means to be resilient. This past year, all of us have faced obstacles both big and small. These challenging times have tested our resilience and forced us to persevere in difficult situations. I hope that through this series, the Friar family can feel inspired to overcome all obstacles they face and learn what it means to be resilient. I recently sat down with Provost Sean Reid. Dr. Reid has been PC's Senior Vice President for Academic Affairs and Provost since July. He moved from Ithaca, New York to Providence, Rhode Island in the middle of a pandemic. In our conversation, he shares how he has been able to stay motivated during these times, the challenges he has faced so far in his role as Provost, and some words of advice for current PC students. Good morning, Dr. Reid. Thank you for taking some time to meet with me.
Good morning, Addison. It's a pleasure to meet you and look forward to the chat.
Well, to kick things off, I just want to ask you to tell us a little bit about yourself and how you wound up here at PC.
Okay, so I'm Sean Reid. I am the provost here at PC. I've been here since July 1st. Immediately prior to coming here to PC, I'd been the dean of the School of Business at Ithaca College in upstate New York, near your hometown in Rochester. And I'm originally from Boston, Massachusetts. And I left Boston at 17 to go in the Navy. And this is as close as I've gotten back to home since 17 years old. So psyched to be here at PC and loving my experience so far.
Oh, well, I'm happy to hear it. And you had to make that big move from Ithaca to Providence during the pandemic. Tell me a little bit about that experience and some of the challenges that came with moving your family here.
Well, it's always tough to move. You know, I grew, had a career in the military as well as in academia, and my family and I have moved around a lot over the course of the 32 years that my wife and I have been together. It was interesting. Prior to going to the Naval Academy at age 17, I had never been out of the state of Massachusetts, so that whole join the Navy, see the world type thing was an important motivator for me. But since making that initial move, we've moved around quite a bit, and like you in your lifetime, having moved around with different assignments as your dad got different corporate postings, when you move in the military, you take your whole family with you, and it's always a challenge. But moving in the middle of a pandemic has been a particular challenge. Not being able to get out and make friends as easily as you could. We have 7 kids of our own. 2 of them one's a senior in high school and one is a 5th grader. 5th grader is, adapted, and she's going to school in person and making friends, and she seems to be doing fine. The one that's a senior in high school, it's tough. It's a tough time to move under the best conditions going into your senior year in high school. But when you're doing virtual learning and things like that, it makes it particularly challenging. For me, it's number one, I'm used to moving around a lot. I've had a bunch of different jobs, and it hasn't been that big a deal for me. But even my wife, who she is a stay-at-home mom with our kids, and having a neighborhood where people are hunkered down because of the coronavirus and stuff has made it difficult all around. But in balance, good move for everybody. Love being here at PC, and like Rhode Island, no offense, much better than upstate New York.
Well, I take a little offense to that.
As you should.
So touching back on keeping your kids motivated and yourself motivated during these difficult times, how did you manage to do that? So going through the application process, through the pandemic, and then having 7 kids who are in a wide range of ages, how do you keep them motivated and inspired to keep working hard even though these are challenging times?
Great question. I think a big part of it, there's not a lot an external force can do to generate resilience in someone else, right? So if someone doesn't have that internal drive, it doesn't matter if you're the parent of the century, there's nothing that you can do to make someone adapt well. My oldest kids are not really with us. My oldest son is a pilot in the Navy. My second oldest is an emergency room doctor in Connecticut. My third oldest is a speech pathologist in Boston, and they're kind of out of the nest and on their own, so they weren't particularly involved. Our number 4 was going into her senior year in college at Ithaca College, and she did not want to transfer going into her senior year, obviously. So she stayed behind. She was living in an off-campus apartment, and she's doing fine with college. We had one daughter that was a sophomore. She's a sophomore now, that had transferred to Bryant, didn't want to be that far away, and that ended up being fine. But the 2 that are in the house with us are a senior in high school and a 5th grader, and it's tough for a senior in high school to move going into their senior year. It's tough, not knowing the teachers, being in a remote environment. It's challenging moving under the best conditions, but when you don't have a face-to-face guidance counselor or a coach, for example, to work with, makes it tricky. And little kids are just easier. If you have any little brothers or sisters or nieces or nephews, when you're 10 years old, it's, "Hi, I'm Erin. Want to be my best friend?" Great, yeah, let's be best friends. And so they're a little bit more nimble than the older ones.
Exactly. I wish it was that easy now. Same spirit, right?
Yeah, life gets complicated as you get older, doesn't it?
It does. Well, it sounds like, each of your children have had to adjust and face different challenges. What would you say has been the greatest challenge coming into the provost position and comparing it to your previous experiences in academia and the challenges you have now leading students?
It's a new job, and that was, never mind just being at a new school. The role of a provost is very different than the role of a dean. Making the transition from a faculty member to being a dean is not a huge deal. You can step from one role into the other fairly easily. A lot of the skill sets are the same. It's being a scholar and a teacher and a mentor and working very closely with the students. The same things that make you a good professor can make you a good dean. When you shift into the role of a provost, it's much more in working with the faculty and the administration, and you have obviously a broader set of responsibilities that are campus-wide instead of just focused on a small subset of it. But my biggest challenge has been, from my earliest days as a professor through being a dean, I'd always prided myself on the relationship that I had built with my students. And as the provost, especially being the provost in a pandemic, don't have the opportunity to interact with the students as much as I had before. And part of it is I don't feel like I have the connection as the provost that I did as a dean, but it's also the job just isn't as much fun. A big part of why people stay as professors and in academia is it's incredibly energizing to be around students, and that's why most of us got into the business in the first place. So being in a job where you don't regularly interact with the students is very different for me. But I will say that I'm getting that fix a little bit by teaching my first class here at PC this semester. I'm teaching an introductory finance course that I'm having a blast with, and really getting to know some of the students. So I'm hoping that it'll get better when people aren't always masked up or studying remotely and things like that. But it's been an interesting year.
Right. It definitely has. Zoom University is not nearly as much fun as being in the classroom on campus, but I think, the Providence faculty and professors have done a really good job at adjusting and making the classroom experience online just as valuable as in person. But you spoke a little bit about building relationships and how much you enjoy being around students and that human connection. And I would agree, during these times, networking and continuing to build those relationships, even if it's online, is really crucial. What would you say are some other skills that students should be, trying to enhance as they're entering, the business world, adult life, in addition to building those relationships?
I think, the topic of the interview that you asked me to bring up was resilience, and that's one that I go back to a lot. I think that that's the single biggest thing that you can develop over the course of your career as a college student to make you more valuable when you go out into the real world. And, it's all relative. If you just look at the definition of resilience, it's, I can't give you the verbatim one, but how well do you bounce back from adversity, right? And so if you look at it, adversity is relative. What is a major setback for one person given their life circumstances might be a day in the park for another person based on their life experiences. But it really is, it varies from person to person. So, if you think about the student body at Providence College, a lot of the students that we have here were top of their class in high school and class president and captain of an athletic team, and then they come to Providence College where there's a bunch of other students that were class presidents and captains of their team and valedictorians and all that, and all of a sudden many students go from being the big fish in a small pond to just another one of the excellent students that we have here at PC. So it makes that a little bit challenging. I use the analogy a lot of athletics, and I am a huge, that was an important part of my college experience as a hockey player, and I joke a lot about saying I learned as much from my coaches as I did from my professors. But the one thing where I think that comes true more than anything is I imagine there's some phenomenal athlete out there that's never lost a competition in their life, but anyone that's involved with athletics has lost a tough game or a tough match or a tough bout at some point in their life. And how do you respond from that? And the saying, it doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, it's how many times do you get up. Whatever it is that knocks you down, you learn a lot about yourself by how you get up. And when you talk about why resilience is so important for everybody, it's you don't really know what you're capable of until you put to the test. And if you've always been the valedictorian and the class president and the captain of the football team, you've only known success. You don't know how you're going to react to a setback. And so I think every kid that comes to college is going to have a setback at something. For many, it's the first A- that they ever got in their academic career. For many, it's, hopefully not, but having to drop a class or falling behind or not having, friends or being one of the popular kids, whatever it is. It varies from person to person, but I don't think there's one student that goes through a career in college that hasn't had a meaningful and important setback, and you learn a lot about yourself by how you bounce back from it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And what's so unique about the situation we're in is that we all experienced a setback at the same time, big or small. So
misery loves company.
Exactly. And so I guess one final question that I would have is for any students who are struggling to find their resilience and be able to pick themselves up when they're down, what one piece of advice or motivation do you have for those students?
The Friar family. And I know that you see it everywhere and it's all on the marketing material and things like that. Look, applying for this job as the provost, you can read a lot about the Friar family, and it sounds nice when you're reading about it and seeing things on the webpage, but you don't really appreciate it until you get here and you're part of this community. Never been at a place where there are more people concerned about their students, colleagues, and friends. If someone is feeling like they have a setback, there's somebody out there that wants to help you, whether it's a professor or an advisor or the counseling center or a coach or your RA or anyone on campus. Somebody out there is interested in you as an individual, and if you're dealing with a setback, we're here to help. But, as much as we try to identify the people that might be experiencing a setback, a lot of times people suffer in silence, and that's dangerous. The more you suffer in silence, the more isolated you feel, the more fixated you can become on the setback. The one word of advice I would have for everybody is don't hesitate to ask for help, because there are people here that want to help.
That's a great piece of advice. Well, Dr. Reid, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me this morning and touch on resilience. I think it's an important word to have in our vocabulary during these challenging times.
Great. Well, it was a pleasure meeting you, and I look forward to seeing you around, hopefully sometime before you graduate, not on Zoom.